Is there a question?
No.
Shall I just go?
Yeah.
You're listening to the Southampton Dellivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
If you want to have guarantees, you have to buy a washing machine.
Fonte with a scooping header.
We don't lose a match, either we win or we learn. And today we learned.
Отдача, Остин! Все-таки забил!
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Bella. Onside, 1-0. Buffon shot! Oh my word!
Unbelievable. He ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Dellivery Podcast, a podcast and newsletter dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans. Available right here on SouthamptonDellivery.com. My name is Matt Markstone. I am the host of the show. And no matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, whether this is your first time or you've been here before, thanks for making the show part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. And I hope that if you've been here before, you kind of at this point know what to expect. This is fairly consistent, fairly reliable, although I am developing a bad habit of going on long rants and not really asking any questions of the guests, but I'll work on that. But you know what you're going to get. And at this point, we're kind of that way with Southampton as well. We know that we have the potential to play well and not score, or play poorly and not score. We generally just don't score. Of course, this week we did have the added spice of some pretty poor refereeing and VAR decisions, but we'll get to that. But back to the consistency stuff. You might as well just call us Deal Sheet FC, because it took yet another deal sheet to get a transfer over the line on deadline day to see Minamino come in from Liverpool. We also sent Long down the road to Bournemouth for the rest of the season, and Minamino comes in on loan to help us out. But it obviously was not the signing we thought we were going to get. It was not Ainsley Maitland-Niles. It was not Billy Gilmore. It was not Tanganga or the plethora of other players that we thought we were going to get to strengthen our fullback position. So I don't know how Minamino feels about playing as a fullback, but hopefully he'll be ahead of Moussa Djenepo on the depth chart. And by the way, Valerie left as well. So we have all kinds of things to discuss. I'm recording this just after the announcement of Minamino and Long and all that stuff. And it was, if you followed along all day on transfer deadline day, it was a long day for you. But it's honestly just one of those times I'm glad I have a job and a time delay, which means I can't pay attention to it all, because it would just drive me nuts. But anyway, joining me to recap the loss to Aston Villa, talk about some transfers and everything else, is Lucy Highnett. We recorded on Sundays before any of this craziness happened. But as always, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy the show, and we'll talk to you on the other side. I'd like to welcome back to the Southampton Dellivery Podcast, Lucy Highnett. You can find her on Twitter at Lucy Highnett. Lucy, hello, welcome. Not the best result, not the best week, but how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I think we've both hopefully finally calmed down after the controversies of yesterday. But no, all good. Kind of getting to grips with lockdown again, which is always great fun. And just really excited to be back on.
Oh, well, I appreciate your time coming on. And I know the message I get from people is, I say, like, whenever it works for you, we can do it. And everybody just kind of goes like, we're not doing anything because we literally can't do anything. And it's like, I'm sorry, but we just had our stay-at-home order lifted in California. But I don't know. I don't think anybody was following it anyway. So we'll see how this all goes as it plays out. And yeah, you mentioned calming down after the game yesterday. I think a lot of us were riled up, and I just messaged you that I was just like tired. Like that exhausted me watching that and feeling that way. And I try not to go on these huge swings and try to stay level, but yesterday was frustrating. And we're recording Sunday evening UK time, so we've had about 22 hours to like let it wash over us. But not the best, especially because we'll come on to it. But I thought yesterday we played better than we've played in in some time, and we were denied the result, and that doesn't feel good. But then I have to remind myself that we played pretty, not poorly, but we didn't create a lot of chances, and we were outperforming our XG and all that stuff early in the season. We were getting results, so maybe it evens out, but it doesn't feel like that because for a number of reasons. But before we do any of that, do you have any Saints in your fantasy team still?
No, I sold Evans this week for Calvert-Lewin. That didn't really make any difference. It's just 1 point for 2 points. But no, I haven't got any more. I think kind of since our drop in form, I kind of haven't really bothered with them from an FPL perspective. It's painful enough watching them not do so well without adding kind of FPL points to the problem.
Yeah. I have McCarthy still, but he's now on the bench, and probably if I have a free transfer that I don't need somewhere else, he'll probably go to make room, salary room for somebody. So we'll see. But yeah, it's a big change when I started with 3 of them in the lineup and had them all starting for a number of for most of the season, and then as you said, we drop in form, they go away. But it made yesterday a little bit easier to take because I do have Jack Grealish. I apologize to everybody. But anyway.
Yeah, I had Martinez. It's the worst 10 points I think I've ever had.
Yeah, I also have Martinez and Watkins.
That's what's emerged.
Yeah. So, but let's talk very briefly, just because I think watching us play Arsenal, I think that game was hard to watch. I just, as you said earlier before we were recording, you just didn't think we were very good, and we didn't look good. We looked tired. We looked sluggish. It just wasn't a very good performance. And after that match, looking ahead to Aston Villa, I didn't really feel confident going into that. But I guess can you give me a brief summary of how you felt just post Arsenal match before we hosted Villa at St. Mary's?
Well, first of all, I was seething that Cedric had put in his probably best ever St. Mary's performance against us. I spent that, the pre-match being like, haha, Cedric, he's so bad, he's playing off the left, he's just terrible. Oh, that's at least an opportunity for us. And then he puts an absolute blinder. So that wasn't great. And I think all of the vulnerabilities I was worried about that Arsenal game kind of came to fruition. They targeted our wings really effectively. I thought Saka looked particularly good for Arsenal. And yeah, I think it did put me a little bit of a worry about this Villa game, especially with Walker-Peters still out. Mm-hmm. The real worry was your FPL player Grealish, just because he's one of the best players in the league, I think. So certainly outside the kind of big teams, and having no real kind of cover at right back, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That was, I think, probably my main worry. And then, of course, kind of our inability to score goals, as I'm sure we'll come on to as well, was the kind of the problem at the other end, I guess.
Yeah. So before the Arsenal match, I tweeted, please attack their left-hand side as much as possible, run at him, off him, and to his back post. Thanks. So that was cool. And then, as you said, Cedric just did what I've very rarely ever seen him do. And I followed that up with a little brief warning here. This is why I shouldn't talk about players. Cedric having his best ever match at St. Mary's. Yeah, what a mess that was. I think going into, and I think with Walker-Peters still out coming into the game, whoever is going to be at right back, which I thought it was going to be Diallo, we'll talk about it in a second. I thought it was going to be a real problem. I think the idea of Grealish running at Valerie would be bad, but I think there are a number of issues, and there's no real win for Ralph there. And I wonder what that conversation was like between Ralph and JWP, whether it's, I don't know. We'll see here, but I wasn't filled with confidence. And then, as you said, the transfer market just doesn't seem to be going our way, and I'm worried about that. But let's talk a little bit about the lineup. There are a lot of things to discuss in the game, whether it's the fact that we actually did create some good opportunities. We had a lot of possession and shots and things like this, and then also the refereeing decisions. And Mike Dean will also be the referee at Old Trafford on Tuesday, which is going to be great. So yes, let's talk about the lineup first. Were you surprised at all with just the personnel choices, and then also with the way where people set up with JWP at right back, with Diallo and Romeo in the middle, and then Redmond up top next to Ings instead of Adams?
I suppose Adams dropping out was the kind of biggest personnel shock, given what we knew about injuries. But I think Adams has looked a little bit tired, a little bit fatigued in recent weeks. I don't think it was, a massive shock as much as it was a kind of bigger one from that lineup. I think rather than the lineup from a personnel perspective being a surprise, it was the way they kind of lined up when we saw kickoff. I think most educated guesses had put Diallo as the right back. I think more than anything because he's got good pace and he's shown that in recent games. But it was Ward-Prowse there, and I think that probably had an influence on the goal we conceded actually. And I think then also having Redmond as the kind of partner to Ings rather than Walcott was probably a bit of a shock as well. That certainly took me a little bit of time to kind of work out. So I suppose, more than anything, it was kind of how they'd come out on the pitch rather than the lineup specifically.
Yeah. I expected Diallo at right back, and I wonder if it's James Ward-Prowse going to Ralph and saying, "Look, I've done this before. I'll do it again. Like I'm like as the captain, taking responsibility and saying, I'll do this. I will, basically I'll man mark their best player." Or if it's Ralph saying, I need you to do that for that same reason. You've done this before. You have a little bit more experience. You've played against him before, and whereas Diallo really has not. I don't know. I don't know what that decision making is there. My biggest worry about not having Ward-Prowse in midfield is he's been the constant in there. He's been there for every minute of the season, and I just worried about us not being able to move the ball quick enough. And you have Romeo and Diallo in there, two guys that I would, I guess, categorize more as defensive midfielders instead of somebody who can pass the ball forward. But I thought they did okay. And honestly, going forward, I thought Ward-Prowse, having him out wide to put balls into the box or crosses and things, I didn't think he was that bad, but he did his lack of pace definitely played a role in the goal that we conceded. But at least, I mean, what do you think the justification for him going to right back instead of Diallo was, or do you think do you think it was the right decision?
I think what is in Ward-Prowse's favour is that he has a very kind of intelligent tactical brain and quite a lot more experience at Premier League level than Diallo. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking that Hasenhüttl saw that as the big thing in his favour. I think we've already seen Zaha have a tough game against Ward-Prowse in that kind of position, mm-hmm. Which may have been the inspiration as well. But I can see why Ward-Prowse was given it. I just thought that the physical demands of that position might be why he went for Diallo, just because Grealish is so good at picking up those little pockets and running off the back of you. Mm-hmm. And I think we saw that for the goal, and I think we saw it repeatedly. They just weren't finding him. So that was my real concern. And the other problem Ward-Prowse has, rather than purely from a defensive perspective, is that because he doesn't have, bags of pace, he often struggles to make those transitions between attack and defence. So even if he's made the correct move in defence, he's not always up the pitch. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's been a massive part of our outlet from an attacking perspective, has been Kyle Walker-Peters, mm-hmm. Being available for those diagonals, kind of giving their flank something to think about, because there's often that really good overload. I don't think there's any real potential to provide that overload when you're playing Ward-Prowse in that position. So I can see why he wanted to do it. And I think, that it isn't an irrational idea. I think I'd have just preferred to put Diallo in there because he's got that pace, and as you said, Ward-Prowse is kind of such an important part of the central midfield game. Mm-hmm. But I don't think the decision Ward-Prowse over Diallo has decided the game by any means, because I think anyone would struggle with Grealish, and in fact, probably if we had Walker Peters, we'd still struggle with Grealish because that's how good he is.
Yeah.
So as much as it was kind of, a surprise and perhaps not something I'd have personally done, I don't think it's been the kind of deciding factor in the game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like Ralph is going to get criticism for that decision, I think, no matter what he does. But and more so, the criticism will go up the ladder to the hierarchy for not getting us someone else to play behind Kyle Walker-Peters, other than Valerie, who Ralph obviously doesn't trust, and who looked good, as a midfielder in spells coming on late in games, but wasn't given that. And I would have been, I think, maybe more disappointed had Diallo gone to the bench, Ward-Prowse played next to Romeo, and then Valerie get torched by Grealish all match. And I should just say that Matt Targett, another former Southampton fullback, also having a very good game against us at St. Mary's. And luckily this week, Luke Shaw, we're playing away, so we'll see if he plays. I can't remember if he's injured or what, but
no, he has an extra game.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah, Shaw's in very good form. Has his target. Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
That's how it is.
Awesome. So if anybody else wants to leave, they can also have a very good time against us if they wish. The other big decision, I thought, Redmond instead of Walcott next to Ings. You mentioned Adams looked a little bit tired, so I don't really think it's a big deal giving him a rest, especially with we're going to have to manage minutes a little bit better than we have. And I can honestly say I was happy to see Redmond up top because he's played that second striker role under previous administrations, I guess, and previous managers, and he never really. I mean, he was never dominant. He doesn't score enough goals, but I thought he could have done. He can do the pressing, and I thought it was going to be okay. I wouldn't say he had a great game yesterday, but I wouldn't say he was terrible by any means. But what did you make of Redmond playing next to Ings?
I thought some of the criticism he received during the game was pretty disproportionate, particularly given that he hasn't really had a lot of starts recently due to injury. Mm. I don't think, as you said, he had a brilliant game by any means. But what I do think it did is it gave us something a little bit different up front. And I think to a certain extent we've become a little bit stale. I think we've become a little bit predictable. And I think teams were starting to work out a bit. Mm-hmm. And I think having that kind of dynamic of Redmond being the second striker, Walcott and Armstrong kind of milling around, I think we were creating quite interesting positions between the lines. And it was kind of making us a little bit less predictable. And I don't think we necessarily, particularly in the first half, did a lot with that. But what I think it did is it gave us kind of opportunities that we weren't opening up before. So it'll be interesting to see if we kind of tries that sort of thing again. Because it was kind of a kind of interesting variation on what we've done before. But yeah, I thought Adams actually looked quite good when he came on, so I have no idea how he'll line up for next game.
Yeah, Redmond was on the ball quite a bit. He had the most carries of any attacking player, and he carried the ball into the penalty area more often than anybody else. So it wasn't like he wasn't on the ball a lot, but with this, I
think Redmond often struggles with when he should play the ball.
Yes.
So actually, he often comes up very high on these carrying stats. Mm-hmm. But in some circumstances, you're like, well, you shouldn't really have carried that because you should have got rid of it quite a long time ago.
Yes.
And that makes him quite a frustrating watch for a fan's perspective because so many times, if he played it simple and played it sensible, he'd have opened up much more of an opportunity than his 9 touches, which in the end took him down a blind alley or something.
Sure.
I think that's what I struggle with Redmond sometimes.
Yeah, and if you give the ball up kind of right away, make the easy pass, and then make that same run, that same movement, only without the ball, because you don't have the ball anymore, you kind of open up a different passing lane, and maybe you get the ball back, and you're in a better position to shoot. And kind of all on those same lines, he managed 4 shots yesterday, none of them on target. Some of them pretty decent chances, and frustrating for him to not come up with something a little bit better at times. But I think it comes down to, Ralph had to put out a lineup that was not first choice based on the fixtures we have, the injuries we have, and everything else. And once again, I thought it was about as strong as we could have hoped for. And maybe I think maybe our best 11 fit players on the pitch. Maybe make the argument that Adams should be on there too, but he's obviously probably needs a rest. But yeah, that kind of sums that up for me. And overall, I don't think we have a lot to complain about in terms of the performance the team put in. We had 60% possession. We managed 20 shots. The frustrating part, only 5 of them on target. So that was a little low, but I mean, we played very well for portions of the match. And I think it'd be tough to remember us playing much better than this in the recent past, at least for me. And I don't know, just an overall summary from you of the match. Were you, with the performance, I guess, were you pleased with it? Were you okay with it? Or how did you feel?
I thought the second half was significantly better than the first. I thought the first had a lot of good build-up play, a lot of kind of interesting interchanges, but we weren't really creating kind of particularly good openings. I thought by the second half, and I think Ralph touched upon it, we were doing much more to be incisive with the ball. Mm-hmm. And I think, but for some kind of Martinez heroics and some pretty damn good blocks from their side, mm-hmm. I think we'd have found at least a goal. And I think that's what makes, before you even get onto VAR and what might have happened there, I think that's what makes it so frustrating, is that probably for the first time in a while, we looked like we were quite capable of scoring goals, and we haven't managed to find one. I thought the Gineppo right-back decision was a bit bizarre. And I thought if I was Valerie, I would have been particularly insulted by that. I just think, I don't think there are any merits for Gineppo as a right back at all, and that's not even to say I don't think Gineppo is a good player. I think Gineppo has potential as a player, definitely, but you just get nothing from him at right back. He just does bizarre things defensively, and then when you finally get him up the pitch, which I guess was kind of his benefit, that you could exploit him in an attacking sense, he just never wants to put a ball in, but he would rather just dribble and hope that someone else comes and helps him out. Yeah. And I just thought, for all of the problems there may be with Valerie, at least he kind of does kind of conventional right back things. Yeah. Which I'm just looking at Gineppo thinking, what are you doing? Like, please stop. And the injuries are a massive part of why that happened. Yeah. But I just thought it got to a point where is Hasenhüttl just making a point about the window, about the recruitment, about the squad, rather than thinking about what actually might benefit the team on the pitch. Because I found the whole performance a bit terrifying, really, from Gineppo. Yeah. And when he came on, I had no idea. I mean, the commentators here were talking about, does that mean that Stuart Armstrong goes into the middle and Gineppo goes out wide, and then Ward-Prowse stays at right back, and then all of a sudden it was Gineppo at right back, Ward-Prowse in the middle, Armstrong in his normal spot, and then it just seemed like Gineppo was just in acres of space and deciding just to run almost directly, like to halfway between the line, the sideline of the penalty area and the sideline of the 6-yard box. Just like, I'm just going to run to halfway between those two things with the ball and do nothing with it. And it was kind of frustrating. And you look at all the space he had and the time he had, he hopefully, as creative as he is, something would have happened, but it just didn't come off. But I guess we have to come now, like the big talking points of the game, obviously, are there's 2 VAR decisions that don't go our way, and then their goal. And, I guess it just chronologically, Matty Cash's handball. Initially, I was yelling at the television. I thought for sure we would get a penalty out of it, and we would for sure go 1-0 up. And I was just hoping that, we would do that, and like my nerves would calm down, and we looked like we deserved a goal at that point because we were already all over them. And then it didn't happen. And I really struggled for a reason why it didn't happen until somebody pointed out that it came off his own thigh, and therefore it's not a penalty. And I don't know. Ralph said it was good goalkeeping after the match from him. I saw somebody post up on the fantasy thing that Matty Cash had 1 save today, which was nice. Made me laugh. But I mean, for you, how frustrating was that? And then I guess, where do you stand on, is that a penalty? And
is that explanation of it coming off the thigh a valid one for you?
Well, first part of that question, how frustrating is it for you? I was mainly, to start with, just frustrated that they spent so long looking at it, because I was like, well, that's a clear handball. Why are we spending 3 minutes looking at it? Turns out it's not, so fine. Yes, it is frustrating. I thought Matty Cash's own comments after the game said it all, really. I think it came off my quad, so you don't actually know. And also, I haven't seen it back yet, which is also
okay.
Not something to say if you're innocent, is it? I think this all comes down to VAR's kind of history with the handball rule, especially this season. They started applying the handball rule much more kind of literally, kind of objectively at the beginning of the season, and we were seeing about a gazillion penalties a weekend, which clearly was kind of distorting the competition to a certain extent. And so I think most were in favour when they decided that they'd reinterpret it for, I think, what they called a softened approach. And that has placed more emphasis on expected arm positions and the ability to react and things, which I think is why there was so much read into the fact it came off Cash's leg.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the rules are pretty clear that if you intentionally move your hand towards the ball, which I think he did, and the fact that it hits his leg makes absolutely no difference to that. You know, it was such a negligible deflection. It took us so long to work out it even happened. So he's moved his hand towards the ball, one thing. And there's another part in the rules that says that if the hand or the arm has made the body unnaturally bigger, which it also has as well. You know, I think a lot of the Champions League application of the rules has been if it's making, you know, if it's outside the silhouette of your body or whatever, that should be a handball. So it applies in that sense as well. So, I mean, the fact it came off his leg doesn't have any kind of influence on either of those. So I'm at an absolute loss to explain why it wasn't given. But again, I think it's just part of the whole VAR problem with trying to make very objective rules and judgments about what is essentially quite a subjective game, and why there has always been controversy about certain decisions and why there will continue to be. And the idea that VAR can eliminate those, I think, it kind of almost needs to be forgotten, because I just don't think it will work, at least not in the current implementation.
Yeah. I think you watched how many Saints players immediately were appealing for the handball decision, and the lack of Aston Villa players arguing, you know, that it wasn't. And I think that says something.
Say a lot from the reactions.
And I don't think Aston Villa, I don't think Matty Cash, I don't think anybody could have complained if it would have gone against him. It's just, I mean, it was one of those things where I was shocked that it didn't happen. And, you know, I tried not to get too down because we were really looking dangerous at that point. And we should say, just a bright spot, maybe, the play from Ings to get it to that point was absolutely beautiful. I forget who was defending him at that point, but he destroyed them with that little touch going around and everything. So I thought that was one of those instances where we played the ball really well. We had a decent chance there. But Cash definitely makes his body bigger with the arm coming out, and I thought that was enough for it to be a penalty until they argued away on Twitter that it came off his thigh. I don't know. That's where that one goes for me, and it's frustrating. And then I guess moving on to their goal, my Arsenal supporting friend Josh pointed out to me that Arsenal played the most crossfield balls, like the most switches of play they had all season against us midweek. And the second most they'd ever done was the first time they played us. And so they had kind of their tactics writer, one of their tactics writers had pointed out that seemed to be something that Mikel Arteta had clued in on, whether it's to a way to beat the press or whatever it was. And then if you look at the Villa goal, it's Douglas Luiz across to target and immediately forward for Grealish, who was in behind Ward-Prowse. And Target managed to find him this time. And Grealish put in a beautiful ball. Barkley gets on the end of it. It was just a nice goal from Aston Villa, a frustrating one to concede simply because we had been kind of knocking on the door. But to see us undone that way, it's kind of hard to be really mad at anybody other than you just think that if Ward-Prowse was a natural right back or a little bit faster, that probably doesn't happen.
Yes, I think we spoke about it earlier, this whole kind of Ward-Prowse versus Diallo right back thing. It was quite clear that Grealish had peeled off the back of Ward-Prowse and there wasn't a lot he could do to recover from that point. I do think, actually, having spoken about Diallo as a right back, I think it looks like Barkley's the one that peels off the back of Diallo. He loses him in the build-up, which gives him that position in the middle of the area to head home. So neither of the two people we were debating about really kind of covered themselves in glory. But, it wasn't an awful goal to concede by any means. I think it was nicely constructed by Villa. So I kind of can't really complain about it too much. And I think Watkins had already given us a little bit of a warning a couple of minutes earlier when he managed to wriggle into the box. So it looked like the kind of dominance of the first half an hour, which again, as I said, we kind of dominated possession but didn't do a huge amount with it from a kind of clear-cut openings perspective. I think that had started to kind of ebb away and we were seeing opportunities arise. And it was quite clear that although Villa hadn't really done much with the ball in the first half, they were much better at constructing the kind of clearer cut, good quality opportunities, kind of with a bit more cutting edge. And I think that their goal was kind of emblematic of that. And obviously, it doesn't help when you feel like they shouldn't even have 11 men on the pitch, arguably. So, it was a kind of tough one to take before half time, but not in a position where you thought it was, critical or that wasn't, something we could come back from.
Mm-hmm. And you talking about them not having 11 players on the pitch because you think Matty Cash should have been sent off potentially for that?
I think there's a decent argument that he was sent off. Okay. They're either down to 10 or at the very least we're 1-0 up, aren't we? But, I mean, I'm assuming we score it. Actually, I was talking to my husband about it in the game when I kind of was getting so irate we hadn't got a penalty. He was like, well, you'd have probably missed it anyway because Ings and Ward-Prowse don't always score their penalties, do they? I don't know if he was just winding me up, but it did make me think that maybe I shouldn't have just assumed it would have been a goal. But yeah, I think there's that bitterness is particularly rammed home when you concede. You think, well, should we have conceded? Should we be 1-0 down? But there we go. That's how it is. But I didn't think that there was something that would I didn't think that would be the final goal in the game, to be quite honest.
Yeah. No, I thought there was definitely going to be some other scoring happening. And even if we do get a penalty, that's our best chance of the game, right? Like that's going to be XG wise and everything else. That's the one, like, even if it doesn't go in, it's going to be, and that would have put our XG somewhere around 3 for the day had we gotten a penalty there. So, I think we'll take that chance. You mentioned Villa creating a couple of chances. They created several chances just in that 40, 41, 42 minute mark towards the end of the half when we seemed to tire a little bit. And that's when I guess they took advantage of that. And that Barkley header is not easy, right? Like the cross has to be there. He is running free. So I guess that is makes it slightly a better opportunity for him, for Barkley. And then he does have to stretch to get his head to it. It's a good header. And I was just looking at that Villa midfield, like Barkley, I always kind of admired when he was at Chelsea. I think he could be better than he is probably. But watching Grealish run with the ball is always really nice, unless he's running at your own team, and then it's not so great. But I mean, they looked decent for portions when they were attacking, even though we had most of the ball and created a lot of opportunities, like you said, just not a lot of better. I mean, we had some shots from 35 yards out, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 of them. I don't really know what we were doing, but whatever. Have a whack, guys, because we're not scoring anyway. And then I guess on to the one where we should have scored, and we did score, and Ings did manage a goal in stoppage time. And I guess what did you see in that offside decision that went against us? How did that, to you, how does that justified by the officials or by VAR, or is it still not?
I'm less angry about this one Mainly because I don't think it's a clear-cut decision one way or another, which I felt that the cash handball was. I am still quite uncomfortable with the way VAR legislates on offsides. I think there is too much margin for error for how exact they're applying it.
Mm-hmm.
From the perspective, their lines don't ever seem that kind of exact, if I'm honest. Like, there were a few freeze frames yesterday where the lines didn't even seem to be kind of parallel. I didn't really understand it. And also, I'm never quite sure if they've frozen the frame at the right split second, or even if they have the technology that can even do that. Because I've seen that Ings opportunity multiple times, and I'm not even clear that the ball has. I think the ball's already left his foot. So I have that problem with it as well. I know some leagues, I think it's the MLS. Is it the MLS? You'd be able to tell me. They don't apply it with the same kind of exacting standards, do they?
I have no idea. I haven't watched an MLS fixture in a while. Sorry.
I'm just thinking that I just don't know how it can be that exact with what's available to it. I think this sleeve nonsense is just a bit bizarre because I can't remember the last time I saw a player score with that part of their arm and it not be given as handball. I think once you get the kind of sleeve length, that's quite a long way down your shoulder, isn't it? Down your arm.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure that's the right line. Like, we'd gone from the armpit earlier in the season to this kind of sleeve line now. The armpit I already had a problem with because I thought that was a bit ridiculous because how many people score at the top of their shoulder anyway?
Yeah.
Now he's seeking down the arm, which is already a bit weird. And yeah, I find the whole thing just a little bit weird. I think you mentioned before we came on that you wondered if it was because the offside flag had gone up and they were almost kind of looking for a way to legitimise it. Yeah. Which is highly possible. But yeah, I just find the whole situation a bit weird rather than, particularly disgusting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, me trying to make sense of it to myself, at least, when we were watching, as soon as Ings scored, he puts his hands on his head because the linesman puts his flag up straight away. And I think, the goal is going to be checked for offside no matter what. But in like American football, like from several years ago when they first started reviewing stuff, they would, there has to be evidence to overturn the call on the field. Like there has to be kind of clear and compelling evidence or whatever. And because they put their flag up, that means that, they have to basically see a clear and obvious error there. And there's not. I think you can call that either way. I think in the era pre-VAR, the linesman may not put his flag up there because it's so close, and we're going to analyze it. They're watching it in real time. There's so many things to talk about, and so many places where it could go wrong, and so many places for them to get it wrong. And I just think that because they put their flag up initially, that meant that they were never going to overturn that. It still took them a long time. It is Mike Dean, so two big VAR decisions don't go our way. But Lee Mason and Mike Dean double teamed us yesterday in a way that I didn't want to see. But yeah, and I do appreciate everybody coming up with new concept kits for us next year, having no sleeves, which I think would be great to watch some of the guys run around in Burnley in February with no sleeves. Be awesome. But anyway, I was frustrated by that one, and I think it was only compounded because we had lost out on that VAR decision earlier, and so it just felt like things were piling up on us, and that I guess that was frustrating. And that's also at the time of the game you realize like we probably don't have very many more chances, and to think you've scored and to think you've gotten a point back when you've been hard done by early in the match, and you've created the better chances, I think. And then to have that happen was just frustrating. And as I said before, by the end of it, I was just tired. I was just tired of I wanted to take a nap, but instead I had coffee and didn't take a nap, which I probably should have. I probably should have flipped that or started drinking alcohol, but it was still semi early. Anyway, And so for me at the final whistle, I was tired. I was a little bit frustrated, but I was more just kind of just over it. I was just over, like, the game just didn't seem to go well. We're not having a very good run of it. And then as the injuries piled on towards the end of the game, things just tended to get worse for us, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the injuries really did add insult to injury in an injury way. I realise that adding insult to injury doesn't really work when you're talking about injuries. But you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
I think to come up with no goals and no points was hard enough, but to then have yet more injury problems in what has been one of the most injury-laden seasons I can think of in years, really does make it quite a bitter pill to swallow. And it does leave you wondering, A, about the window of whether we should have done something more, and B, where we go from here, especially when it looks like we've got Romeu and Diallo out at the same time. Which could be very interesting. But yeah, the injuries have been a worry all season, and I was hopeful that as we were starting to get people back, we've got Romeu back and we've got Redmond back, and I was hoping we kind of turned a corner from that perspective. But it looks like that's not going to be the case. Which, kind of piles on the negative. It means it's much more difficult to leave that negativity behind you, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you think it's probably going to have a more long-term impact.
Yeah, and I mean, things I've been thinking about is our XG. We have questions about it. We've been outperforming it for some time. So it's not a surprise really that the goals have dried up that much. And then also with the small squad, you have to know we're going to pick up injuries. And I look at the board and I look at the lack of players coming in, in large numbers. And I kind of understand that it can't happen. We can't bring everybody in that we want. And Ralph understands that. Ralph knows that, but it doesn't make it any easier to stomach when you're looking at, Ralph's brought in, had on the bench and given minutes to guys from the academy. It's not like he is only playing the same 11 people, even though he definitely favors them. And there are times that I think he's had an over reliance on players or played them too many minutes. I think we wait sometimes one match too long to give somebody a rest. But then again, I don't have the sports science data and the monitoring that they have. And, I'm not talking to the players every day. I don't know that stuff, but that's just kind of my feeling on it. And we're in the middle of a run of fixtures right now that was always going to be hard for the team. The matches we're playing are difficult. The time that we're playing them in terms of the lack of days off and things like that. And, I'm not overly surprised that this season we've seen a ton of injuries around the league. People going down with muscle injuries and like that, things like that more often than in previous seasons. And you just kind of go I'm not sure what I want Ralph to do, but I want him to fix it. I want something to happen so that we are better equipped to kind of finish the season the way we started it versus kind of where we are right now. And I mean, we're sitting 11th in the table. If you would have asked me at the beginning of the season, given the squad we have and everything else, is 11th okay? I probably would have said yes. And I probably would have said that's fine. But I think I got excited just like everybody else did based on the way we were playing. And, we were top of the table for a couple of days and things like that. Those to kind of fall from that, I think it makes all of this harder to stomach. But I guess maybe in perspective of what the club looked like financially and not taking any pressure off of Gao to actually do something. But you look at some of those transfers, just think, Wesley Hoot, the fact that we had to cut a deal with Guido Carrillo and what we must have had to pay him to leave. The same thing with Jordy Classy, the same thing with the last three managers we've had. We've outlaid a lot of money there. And so the club has been limited in what they can do. Then they get hit with a pandemic. I'm not ranting, but I have all of these kind of ideas in my head that what more, what do you want them to do other than, you want the owner just to dip into his pocket and give you, $60 million to go out in the transfer market. And I don't think any of us ever realistically thought that was going to happen. Sorry.
Is there a question?
No.
Shall I just go?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. think there are some unrealistic expectations of what the owner is there to do and whether an owner should have to accept basically losing their own money to run a Premier League football club. As much as that's true, and as much as I think there are problems with that, and I think the idea of having a kind of a club that looks after itself and doesn't need to have some kind of sugar daddy is a good one. I do think you need a bigger squad. And to a certain extent, I don't think it needs to be a squad that is filled with superstars that are very expensive or have very high wages. But we skimmed down our squad to not a lot, partly at the manager's request. He Hasenhüttl was very open about the fact that when he arrived, he felt the squad was way too bloated. It was too big and he wasn't interested in playing that many players. But I feel like we possibly went too far the other way. We kind of skimmed it all down and we probably left ourselves a little bit short. Now, I didn't expect us to then go into this window and spend £30 million on, a couple of players, because that realistically isn't going to happen. It's not something we can finance. What I did wonder was if we might see a few kind of low cost or perhaps loans. I know the Niles was linked to last couple of days. Either low cost or loans that would give us just a little bit of breathing space, because the problem we're having now is not only do we have players missing, which is a problem in itself, and I think Vestergaard in particular has been a huge miss. Not only is that a problem, but it has such a knock-on effect on the other players. I think Shea Adams has been one of the big players that, because he's been fit nearly all the time, apart from that concussion, he just looks so tired. And I think a lot of the players that haven't had injury problems are a long way off the level they would otherwise be, because they just don't get any kind of break. And so I just thought there should be something done in this market. And I know it's a very difficult market to operate in. And I know we have, the impacts of the pandemic and a pretty poor financial review. And I'm really kind of expecting anything huge. But I just thought there needed to be some kind of very realistic, practical measures taken to try and just alleviate some of the pressure.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. And I think it's going to just be a bit rough for a few weeks until we start getting on top of things. And I think it'll become clearer where we are once we know a bit more about the injuries we picked up last night as well.
Yeah, I think we could be in trouble. I mean, we have, I think, 4 games over the next 2 weeks, and then it kind of lightens up a little bit. Depends slightly on whether or not we get through that 5th round FA Cup match against Wolves. But I mean, I wouldn't say we're in danger of slipping into a relegation battle. I don't think we're there.
No.
But
no, a long way off. What we're on 29 points?
Yeah, I think so.
You'd expect, I don't think there's any doubt that we'll
get 11 more.
Any doubt that we'll get the kind of 11 or 12 points that you need to be sure. And I think you're right that I think 11th wouldn't have been particularly problematic at the beginning of the season. I think I hoped that we'd get between 12th and 9th, and that's not very in the middle of that. I think it's just the disappointment, that kind of feeling of having lost momentum, and the way it's happened. I think it's not necessarily, although we haven't scored as many goals, it feels like a lot of that is attributable to the kind of squad problems more so than as the fault of our play, I suppose. So I think that's the frustration, that perhaps if we'd been a little better prepared, we might be in a higher position. That said, if we were in a higher position, we were looking at Europa League or whatever. If you think the squad's got problems now, you try putting it through a Europa League season.
Yeah. There was no chance. There's no chance we could survive. And that might be dramatic, but I think if you look at, I think of us going back to that season of Claude Puel, they had to build up that team, that squad, to be big enough to play Europa League football, and then they didn't go far enough, so like those guys didn't get game time, and we didn't qualify again. And all of a sudden now you have all these guys who want game time, and we don't have game time to give them, and then we kind of have the opposite. We kind of have the opposite thing now, where we don't have a squad that's big enough to cope with this. And if the season is I guess stretched out over the normal kind of time frame, maybe maybe it's not as bad. Maybe we get by with it, but you're kind of playing with fire the whole time because it just takes one or two injuries. And then all of a sudden you see 3 guys go down in one match when we're already dealing with an injury crisis. And now you have a kid who handed in a transfer request on Wednesday and got on the pitch on Saturday. And now it looks like he may be starting on Tuesday. That's where we're at. And that's not great. That doesn't feel great for going forward. It doesn't feel like that's where we want to be. If you're okay, let's go on to talk about some of these questions that we have, if that's all right. Unless there's anything else you want to add. I feel bad because there are a couple of people who messaged me like, I can't wait for like they appreciate the positivity. And I try to be positive most times, and I'm a little frustrated at this point.
So.
What's that?
You've really struggled to be positive this week.
I have. It's been a weird week, and it could be. I mean, I live in California. I know we need the rain, and I don't mind the rain, but it's the first time it's rained for a long time, and we've had rain basically for like 3 or 4 solid days, and a lot of rain to the point where like my active minutes per week are usually somewhere between 650 and 700, and this week I'm struggling to get to 300. So like I haven't. There are a lot of things. It's not just us. It's a lot of stuff that's coming, and it's the end of the month, which means all the bills are due. Everything's there. Everything's hitting all at once. That's just all it is. That's what it is. So I apologize, but let's go with some questions. And this will be a good one to start with. Christian Candler says, what is the best way to de-stress after a frustrating series of events? Asking for a friend. So what did you do last night to help de-stress?
I had a very long bath. It was very nice. It was bubbly and peaceful and a long way from my phone or, Twitter or any other debate. It was quite nice. It was a cleansing experience in many ways. I did think about pouring myself a gin, but I thought that could be a slippery slope that I probably shouldn't go down. So I resisted that temptation and kept it clean.
I had too much to drink the night before. My neighbor had his birthday, so we did some socially distanced beer drinking, and I was not going to have a drink, but I did have. I made a nice cup of coffee, and I read a book. That's what I did, and it was great. And then I stepped. Oh, actually, and I looked for videos of the dog. I posted one on Twitter because the dog was barking at the chickens for no reason, and that was nice to just look at how cute she is, even though I hate her. Let's see. Stephen White says, we knew we were outperforming XG early in the season. Is our current league position fair? I'd say
it's a different one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think if you're a good team, outperforming XG a little bit isn't a bad thing, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of why we were outperforming XG was, for example, Ward Prowse scores ridiculous free kicks, and Danny Ings doesn't need a lot of a chance to score a goal.
Right.
So I think those are almost kind of indications that you're doing well, to a certain extent, if you're outperforming it. Then again, I think there was a possibility we weren't creating enough clear-cut opportunities, kind of obvious goal-scoring opportunities, so that when free kicks stopped going in, when Vestergaard wasn't available to knock in some set pieces, when Ings was injured, things probably went downhill a little quicker than you'd expect, and it feels like it swings on you quite a lot.
Yeah.
I think we're a bit better than 11th on performances so far. But I don't, as we kind of mentioned earlier, I don't think it's critical. I think in reality, 8th is about as high as we could have expected, so 11th doesn't really have much of an impact on that. We're certainly not ready for your Europa League campaign, as we've spoken about. So, yeah, I don't know. I always kind of struggle with this idea of kind of tracking performance against XG. But perhaps, we were through a bit of a downturn. I don't know what your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I don't think we've been creating enough clear opportunities. And if you kind of look at our XG versus, like the difference between our XG and our goals scored, we have the widest margin of anybody in the Premier League. And on the other end of the spectrum is Sheffield United. But then you look at teams that are kind of all throughout the table, and outperforming your XG a little bit is fine. Like it's not a perfect kind of thing. It's not going to be 1 for 1. But I look at the, Ward-Prowse scoring free kicks. I mean, he was the first person to score 2 direct free kicks in the same half, I think, in the Premier League period. I think was the stat. And there's a reason for that, because it's not something that those are low percentage chances. And I think the more concerning thing for me is that we're just not creating chances from open play. We're relying on set pieces and corners and things like that. And that is, I think, worrying.
I mean, we are.
Go ahead.
It's looking pretty bad if Ward-Prowse gets injured.
Yeah.
Just because even when he doesn't score free kicks, there's the indirect free kicks or the corners, or it almost always comes out of something, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Related to a set piece.
Yeah.
He's made of iron is probably a great blessing, really.
Which made it even stranger that Bertrand was taking corners from one side yesterday, but maybe that's because of the position Ward-Prowse was playing, or that they had noticed something on set pieces for the way Martinez defends or Aston Villa defend or whatever. But we have some similar questions here. A guy named Geography Tom 9 on Twitter.
I've never heard of him.
I think you know him. He says, "Why have the goals dried up?" And we also have one from Fred Lazaro 2011. It says, "Where have all the goals gone?" And one of those is a patron of the show, and one of them is your husband. So we can answer them both at the same time. But what, I think
we've kind of touched on it, haven't we?
Yeah.
We aren't really good enough both today. And until we do, we're probably not going to score that many. I think also if we are talking about set pieces being an important contribution to our goals, Vestergaard's threat was a really important part of that at the beginning of the season. He clearly worked a lot on his contribution in attacking areas from those kind of situations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another loss. I think Vestergaard being absent has also meant that we've lost a kind of really important part of our build-up play in his kind of willingness to take midfielders out of the game, to kind of bring the ball out, commit other players. Those really great diagonals that he was picking out for Walker-Peters, they're gone, and Walker-Peters is gone. I think the injuries are a really important part of why we've struggled. I think, and I feel like I'm regurgitating what I said earlier, but if you have those injuries, you then can't rotate your squad. So when you've got players in bad form, or you think they could have done more in a game, you can't really change it. And we also had quite a few games where I felt like we were kind of getting on top of the teams, but we didn't have any way to kind of capitalise on that because we couldn't make any decent substitutions. For weeks, it felt like our bench was academy players plus Shane Long, and I just don't think you can really expect to change a game or kind of find something new when that's all you've got to fall back on. So yeah, I think there are quite a number of reasons why we aren't scoring like we were. Because I think if there was one simple reason as to why we weren't scoring more, Ralph would have done something about it.
Yeah.
I think there's also, and I think what I was talking about right at the beginning, is that we are much more familiar for teams than we were a year ago in the way we approach games. I think teams are working out kind of some of our triggers for a press, what we're slightly likely to do when they have their foot on the ball in defence, and kind of ways to work around that press. I think counter-pressing as a general theme is becoming a much more important part of coaching. And so I think had we, been fully fit, had everyone available, we still probably would have experienced some kind of downturn. But I think, there are a multitude of other factors that are kind of stacking it up against us. That said, yesterday, I think we did create enough to score. So,
yeah.
There's only so much you can legislate for. I mean, some of it's just bad luck,
sure.
or great goalkeeping.
Yeah. I would say that that we have a couple of other questions that are along the same lines. Like, is it the injuries that are keeping us from winning games, or has our system been figured out? And I definitely think that the system has been figured out. That's what happens. But if you look at the job I think that Ralph has done since he's come into the team, he solidified us a little bit more defensively. He's turned some players and improved some players in various ways. And I think that with each step that he's been able to figure it out. And so this now, because we are kind of not having the same opportunity to press the team in midfield, force a turnover, make one pass, and have Danny Ings score a low percentage shot, because that's not now really a possibility every game, that the next step will be us creating better chances more consistently. And I think it's going to take time because the players have to learn that step. And I thought yesterday against Villa, which people won't hear this until Tuesday, but I thought yesterday against Villa, several times Armstrong was kind of getting to a spot and then was able to cut it back. And we were having, we had men in the box, we had chances to shoot, and they didn't come off. We didn't score, but they were, they were better opportunities, even though they weren't great. They were better opportunities than we have created in recent weeks. And I think that's a positive that we can take from that, is that the guys are going to have to work to figure those things out. And it's going to be kind of a mess because we have so many injuries, and, we could see Ginevra playing right back, which scares everybody but the opposition, I think. And then, but I have confidence in Ralph. Like, there's no reason for me to doubt that Ralph will do everything he can to turn the team around, because he hasn't given me any reason to. And the only thing I am maybe worried about now, based on his comments yesterday, where he said, good players cost money and we don't have any money. You look at what happened to Koeman and the fact that he walked away, and you wonder, are we going to wind up approaching that same situation? Because I don't know. And it's all speculation. There's no way for me to know that. But yeah, that's where I'm at. The only other question, because we don't really need to talk about Mike Dean. I just want to say, like, I'm a bald white dude. Lee Mason's a bald white dude. Mike Dean's a bald white dude. Not all bald white dudes are bad people. So don't take it out on all of us. Just need to get that out.
It's important to stay there.
Yeah. Although there are a lot of bad bald white dudes out there. So, like, if you were to see me and, like, immediately think bad person, like, I'll change your mind eventually, but, like, that's okay. Can we talk?
Voldemort's another one.
Yeah. I see. I've never seen or read any of that, so I don't know.
No,
I'm not haven't done it.
Oh wow, that's lost on you, that reference then. So carry on.
So I have a question. So we did have a player. I don't know how to say his name. I think it's Jankovic. The pronunciation that the NBC commentator went with yesterday, it was not the same name, even remotely. And I questioned myself because he's a professional, but then I just went like, no, looking at that, like, that's not it. I don't know.
Yankovic or Yankov. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know the guy you're talking about, though. The guy that handed in his transfer request.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, he is from Switzerland, right? So, like, he handed a transfer request to go back to Switzerland. So maybe there's something there. Maybe it's that he's watched everybody else from his team get called up and get playing time, and he hasn't. But then he gets in the team yesterday, and he gets on the pitch, and it looks like he may actually get a start. So maybe handing in the transfer request, as Justin Woodward points out, is the way to get a start, or to get noticed. Maybe if you tell your boss, hey, I want a raise, then you get a raise, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's fine. I don't really know if we have to discuss anything else. We have one more at the bottom. It says, how could we lose to Villa? By them having a really good goalkeeper performance, by us not taking our chances, and by a couple of VAR decisions that didn't go our way, and just a frustrating evening. I was not happy after we beat Villa 4-3 because of the defensive kind of falling apart we did in the second half. I was really angry after that game, and I was I was just as tired and angry after this one as well, which is not it's not how I want to end, Saturday afternoons. This was a noon kickoff for me. It wasn't like I had all day, but it was most of the day still. Anyway, I don't know. Lucy, I'm sorry to subject you to just me ranting and not asking you questions. I mean, I'm developing a bad habit of doing that. And usually I'm able to cut it out, but I don't think I'm going to be able to cut that one out. So I apologize.
Okay.
I apologize. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add? I mean, is there anything?
I don't think so. I think it was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I was worried about this just because there's so many things that we have to do, and of course between the time we record and the time this comes out, we'll have some sort of conclusion to the transfer window. So we'll see if anybody comes in, whether it's Ainsley Maitland-Niles, whether it's anybody. But we desperately need somebody, even if it's on loan. But
anyone, we'll take anyone.
Yeah, unless they're from Newcastle.
Yeah, we won't think that far.
I don't know if I want anybody from Newcastle. But yeah, and then we have to play that game, which is always fun in your household. Just not long. So anyway, I want to say thank you to you for doing this. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I appreciate your fantasy football advice that I subject you. I make you answer questions every week because I can't make decisions on my own. So if I finish inside the top 1,000,000, it'll be all because of you.
Going big. Well, thanks for having me on, Matt. It's been a pleasure as always, even if the result isn't what we'd like to talk about. And hopefully we'll see something happen in this last day of the window. Yeah,
we can look forward to that, and hopefully, we win the Carl Anchor Derby on Tuesday. That'd be nice, but we'll have to wait and see. So hopefully we'll do this again as long as you're up for it. And thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thanks, Matt.
And that does it for this week's episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Special thanks this week goes out to Lucy Highnett. You can find her on Twitter at Lucy Highnett. If you're on Twitter and you listen to this show and you don't follow her, you probably should, because you just should. So thanks to Lucy for coming on. Thank you to all of you for your questions. Sorry we didn't get to them all. There's a lot to cover this week, and I'm not sure we got there, but we tried. The show would be impossible without the patrons of the show, so thank you for your financial contributions that help keep the show going. Thank you to all of you who are listening as well, and thank you to the Southampton page for keeping me up to date with everything that goes on around the club, whether it's the transfer window or match day. You always have the news that I need to make sure that I'm up to date with everything going on at the club, and I appreciate that. Additional thanks goes out to the Saints Archive for partnering with the show. Use the link in the show notes to get in touch with them. Join a Facebook group that's over 6,000 strong that includes former pros and a lot of really nice people. You can listen to the show wherever you get your podcast, but if you listen somewhere where you can leave a review, please do that. It helps new people find out about the show, and I truly appreciate it. If you have a question or a guest suggestion, please get in touch and let me know. And we'll be back next week to discuss the match against Newcastle. So once again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember that together, we march on.